isinasagawa po ngayon ng Senado ang pagdinig sa panukalang Freedom of Information. Panoorin po natin ito.
Kung wala tayong impormasyon, kasi mahirap kumuha ng ebidensya laban sa kita natin, yung mga whistleblowers natin, hirap na hirap. So maaaring kailangan din po natin ng whistleblowers protection. But at the end of the day, it is better to have many eyes watching the government rather than just one set of eyes like the COA or the ombudsman. Kasi hindi na nga naman, kung iilang mata lang yan hindi naman nakikita o hindi natatanaw ang buong horizon o ang buong kalagayan po ng ating body politic. So, sabi nga ng chairman, there are close to 70 countries which have passed freedom of information statutes. At hindi coincidence na karamihan sa mga pinaka-transparent na society sa ating bansa ay yun din ang pinakamayaman na bansa sa mundo. And we're not talking about mayaman in terms of GNP. Dahil yung GNP minsan nadidistort. Mayaman nga yung bansa, marami namang mahirap sa loob ng bansa. We're talking about countries na mayayaman ang mga mamamayan. Kasi ginagastos ng pamahalaan yung pera para sa mga mamamayan. We're talking about Singapore where they make about $30,000 GDP per capita o bawat individual. We're talking about Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, Nordic countries. So it's no coincidence po. May connection po to. Ito ang dapat na connection na i-pursue natin, ipaalam natin kay Juan de la Cruz na meron siyang interest dito. Hindi lamang ito laban ng mga interested citizens, mga concerned NGOs against the government. Ito po ay interest dahil ang pagiging government official, it's always a dialogue between the governed and those governing. Tumitigil ang dialogo kung walang impormasyon. Hindi lumalalim ang dialogo. So, there are recognized exceptions, Madam Chair, in all countries, and these are given flesh in the bill. Sa Section 7, for example, on exceptions, we have national security. These are under an executive order, national defense, foreign affairs kapag may treaty, at nasa stage pa lang tayo ng negotiation, syempre hindi po pwedeng ilabas yon dahil that would jeopardize our bargaining position. Secondly, yung executive privilege, na there's already a Supreme Court decision, the Ermita case, that says that for the executive to freely ventilate its concerns, these negotiations and ideas must be kept confidential. Yung third is internal or external defense, whether sa military establishment, whether sa PNP. Siyempre, kung may hinuhuli ka, kung may enemies of the state na nais nating dalhin sa batas, hindi naman pwede nating i-expose yung ating mga sekreto. And fourthly is drafts of decisions or orders. Fifth is information obtained by Congress in executive session. Sixth is personal information. Dapat isaalang-alang din ng Kongreso yung rights to privacy of individuals dahil maraming ahensya ng gobyerno that would have information like phone numbers, like maybe meron tayong Credit Information Corporation which has the is empowered to collect data about the payment records to utilities of individuals. Dapat yon, hindi dapat isinisiwalat po yon dahil an individual has the right to privacy, yung address niya kung saan, dahil baka ma-jeopardize yung kanyang seguridad. Seventh is trade secrets dahil may right rin naman yung mga negosyo sa mga patented ideas at wala silang obligasyon na ilabas yun dahil pinaghirapan po nila yon. At pangwalo, yung tinatawag na privileged communication sa ilalim po ng rules of court. Ito po ay mga ideya na binigay po kunyari sa attorney-client privilege, medical information given under the doctor-patient privilege, in the confession, in the course of a confession, and many others provided under the rules of court. Pang-siyam po, yung information may be exempted by law or by the Constitution. To give you an example, Madam Chair, under the juvenile justice law, mga juvenile violators, the information is meant to be kept secret kasi bata pa sila. Ayaw natin na magamit yung impormasyon laban sa kanila pagtanda po nila. Dahil the idea behind that law is to not punish youth offenders, but to allow them to, yung restorative justice, allow them to be restored to to society, makabalik po sila. So yun po yung mga recognized exceptions, Madam Chair. I think the debates will center around that. And in closing, allow me to say that we are lucky at present that we have a president who values transparency. Araw-araw pwede siyang lapitan ng media, kahit anong tanong, wala pong hinaharang, lahat po sinasagot. But that's only for the next 3 years. Hindi natin alam anong mangyayari sa 2016, hindi natin alam anong mangyayari sa 2019, sa 2022. So kailangan, as lawmakers, we should be looking forward, looking after the next generations, and definitely, ito po yung nakikita kong sandata laban sa korupsyon. So, thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us this time.
Thank you for that, Senator Angara. So now let me start our presentations by asking Yusek Batino of the DND to please present their position for the Department of National Defense.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Honorable Senators. The Department of National Defense submitted its position paper to your Honorable Committee, and we would just want to read the excerpts from said position paper. The Department of National Defense has consistently maintained the position that generally official records, documents, and papers pertinent to official acts, transactions, or decisions must be made accessible to the public in keeping with the constitutional right of the people to information on matters of public concern and in the spirit of transparency and good governance. Nevertheless, the Department subscribes to the exemption that state secrets bearing on specifically sensitive national security and defense matters must be kept confidential and deemed privileged information. It is highly imperative that these matters be strictly kept from public access and only availed of by policy and decision makers whose assessments are vital to national security interests. Further, the Department favors the move to provide for effective mechanisms that may allow access to certain information with national security implications to both chambers of Congress through executive session. In addition, the Department also supports the exception to the Freedom of Information Bill regarding personal information of a natural person to protect the confidentiality of personal information of our state officers. Finally, the Department shall participate actively in the formulation of an act that shall provide for specific policies to guarantee the people's right to information and yet sustain safeguards to protect national security interests. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your very concise presentation, but comprehensive. Our next resource speaker is Mr. Ramon Del Rosario from Makati Business Club. Sir, you have now the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable members of the Senate, our friends and partners in government and civil society. If I may be somewhat less concise. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and thank you for this opportunity to share with you the thoughts of the business community on this very important piece of legislation. In 2010, as well as in the recently concluded 2013 elections, the Filipino people, we believe, made a strong statement for integrity and good governance. This collective decision to play on the path towards greater transparency and accountability lies at the heart of the Aquino administration's mandate. Thus, it is essential in pursuit of this mandate that the necessary steps towards institutionalizing a culture of integrity in the country be properly and swiftly taken. Indeed, the Philippines has made substantial progress in various fronts under the Daang Matuwid regime. We have heard the success story of DPWH, where 16.35 billion pesos was reportedly saved in the last 2 years by implementing improved procurement procedures and adhering to competitive and transparent bidding. It is also reported that projects have not only been completed at a reduced cost, but also finished ahead of schedule. In addition, last week it was announced that the economy expanded by 7.5% in the second quarter, the fourth consecutive quarter we have exceeded 7% GDP growth on the back of the prudent management of our macroeconomic fundamentals. Once again, we have beaten expectations and have placed the country ahead of our peers in Asia. Besides this, the country's competitiveness ranking has also greatly improved according to the 2013-2014 World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Report, which is considered one of the most authoritative reports on this. The results of the 2013-14 results were actually just released a few hours ago. And from 85th out of 134 in 2010, the Philippines is now ranked 59th out of 144 in the world in overall competitiveness. This means that whereas in 2010 we were viewed to be less competitive than about 63% of the countries surveyed, today we are ranked better than 60% of the countries who were ranked. And if I may point out, some of the factors that contributed to this improved ranking all have to do with improved governance. On the awarding of public contracts, we were improved by 28 places. On wastefulness of government spending, we improved by 23 places, not in terms of improved wastefulness, but I suppose reduced wastefulness. Ethics and corruption and diversion of public funds, we were up 21 places in both factors, and favoritism in decisions of government officials up 12 places. Equally important, this vigorous thrust towards good governance has resulted in a revitalized and active citizenry that is very eager to get involved in public discourse and to serve as government's partners in our shared goal of a progressive and transparent Philippines. On the part of the business sector, we have launched the Integrity Initiative. We launched this in 2010 as our contribution to this effort. A large number of our people have also advocated greater accountability as seen in the various movements over the last few weeks. It is therefore in the context of our significant gains on the basis of improved governance and a reawakened citizenry that the business community reiterates its strong support for the passage of the Freedom of Information Bill. We believe that this landmark piece of legislation will institutionalize the constitutional guarantee on every citizen's right to information, as well as the state policy towards full disclosure of all government transactions involving public interest. For the business community, among other things, corruption still stands as a deterrent to even more aggressive investments and as a corollary to the creation of more jobs for our people. In the aforementioned 2013-2014 Global Competitiveness Report, in spite of the gains we have achieved in overall competitiveness, corruption still stands as the second most problematic factor to doing business in the Philippines. The passage of the FOI Bill, we believe, will help bring about a level and transparent playing field for enterprises, which in turn will encourage faster expansion of our industries and contribute to more inclusive growth. While we recognize and laud the disclosure mechanisms already being implemented by certain government agencies, notably the Department of Budget and Management in the disbursement of public funds, and the Department of Interior and Local Government with the launch of their full disclosure policy portal, we need the FOI Bill to drive transparency and accountability in governance across all government agencies. It is also of paramount importance to make sure that these mechanisms take root in the bureaucracy well beyond the Aquino administration. We are cognizant of apprehensions regarding the possible abuse of the right to information. However, such concerns, we believe, do not override the fundamental principle that all information on matters of public concern should be made available to the people, subject to clearly defined exceptions. We believe these concerns can be addressed by providing specific guidelines on accessing information or denial of requests for information and mechanisms for appeal. The business community therefore offers its full support for the passage of the FOI Bill. We recently reiterated this call in an August 23rd joint statement signed by 10 business groups, released in the light of the alleged misuse of public funds. It is our conviction that a well-implemented FOI law will be an excellent complement to ongoing transparency reforms and will help ensure that good governance gains we are now enjoying will be safeguarded and sustained. After 4 straight quarters of above 7% GDP growth, we in the business community believe we are on the cusp of an economic breakout, a period of sustained high economic growth. Such sustained growth should provide the basis for more vigorous investments and much stronger job creation, therefore more inclusive growth. This impressive momentum is based largely on our vastly improved governance and transparency and accountability. And as the FOI institutionalizes transparency and accountability, we need the Freedom of Information Bill to sustain our country's present momentum. Madam Chair, honorable senators, in previous Congresses, the Senate was an invaluable partner of FOI advocates as it consistently passed versions of the FOI Bill. In this light, we sincerely hope that the Senate will once again lead in this endeavor and will indeed make the ultimate passage of the Freedom of Information Bill into law as one of the 16th Congress's lasting legacies. Thank you once again for this opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Del Rosario, for that very optimistic outlook also on our economic situation, and also your opinion that FOI will indeed help sustain this momentum that we have. At this time, the chair would like to recognize the presence of our Senator Ralph Recto. Senate President Pro Tempore. Okay, our next resource speaker is Yusek Quezon from the Office of Presidential Communications Group.
Madam Chairperson and Mr. Senators, we submitted a position paper which summarizes the administration bill which we have submitted to your committee. May we point out that this bill had been submitted to the previous Congress and in fact was the backbone of the version that was passed by the Senate. So in many respects, I believe that also surveying the existing bills of the senators present and the other senators who have filed their bills, we are very confident that the contents do reflect what we had submitted with your own additions. I just want to explain a couple of things about this bill and the process that went into it. First of all, the basic points that I believe the administration, advocates, members of the legislature, and the public have in common. The first is that where there is a lack of information, then there is room for doubt. And that is harmful to good governance and to our ability to serve the people. Second, that even though we can point out to you many examples where public information is already out there. If you want to know, for example, the status of infrastructure projects, you can go to dpwh.gov.ph and it is there tracked down to the disbursements. As Mr. Del Rosario pointed out, in the DBM website, government disbursements are there, including past and the proposed budget. In the official gazette, you have official issuances, both by the President and the other branches of government. And the Senate too has taken a lead in that even the drafts of bills are posted for the review of any citizen who wants to look at them. But even with all of these transparency measures, and I think all of us in government can take pride in the fact that over the past 3 years, government is a lot more transparent than ever before. The question is, will it be institutionalized? In other words, kahit gusto natin ngayon, may tutuloy pa rin ba ito? Kahit may ayaw. And that is the whole point of this exercise. Now, what I was asked to do was present to you why do we have our version and what went into it. The first thing we wanted to take up as the study group that was assigned by the President to study this was May mga proposals ang mga advocates at matagal na lang sinusulong ito. May mga proposals ang mga miyembro ng legislatura mula sa Kamara o sa Senado. Naipasok din ba dito ang concerns ng mga miyembro ng bureaucracia? Naipasok na rin ba dito ang pananaw ng pamahalaan? Dahil kung meron mga karapatan ang taong bayan, meron din pong lehitimong mga karapatan ang pamahalaan bilang pamahalaan. So, among the concerns that were tackled was, first of all, that the frank and candid deliberations during meetings should be maintained. That is, habang pinag-uusapan ang policy, kailangan talagang walang hadlang sa pag-uusap. At kung merong hadlang at dahil may pwede ito ilabas, baka mamaya hindi na lang magsalita ang mga tao sa loob. The second is that the executive communications privilege should remain inviolable. The third was that commercial or financial information should be protected if it would prejudice government's ability to transact business. Meron pong ehemplo na binigay ang Pangulo dito. Kunyari merong isang kumpanya na gusto niya mag-establish ng isang call center sa Pilipinas. Ngunit medyo mainit ang politika sa bansa na pinanggalingan ng magiging investment na ito. Pwede bang pilitin ng Pangulo na i-disclose na merong negosasyon na parating? At sa pananaw ng Pangulo, sa ganong ehemplo, baka Pilipino pa ang maging dehado sa ganito. So we had to look at examples like that where it would be to the detriment of the Philippines. The third, and again, this was reflected by everyone, your personal privacy should be protected dahil maraming impormasyon ang publiko na binibigay nila sa pamahalaan at baka mamaya gamitin ito for whatever purposes na hindi maganda, dapat may protection dito. The third was that there should be implementing rules and regulations para malinaw talaga ang mga patakaran. The fourth, which was mentioned by our colleagues in the defense establishment, was national security as well as national defense. Kakaiba po ito. And of course, kung ano ang magiging parusa kung meron lumabag sa batas. Alin bagay ba ang dapat parusahin sa pananaw sa pamamagitan ng mga parusang administratibo at alin ba dito ang dapat kriminal. And basically, so what we did was also in terms of our contribution to this effort, we decided maraming mga klaseng dokumento, mga uri ng dokumento o impormasyon na dapat hindi na pagawayan, dapat by routine ilalabas ito. And generally, and this is with reference to our colleagues in the media, most of the media, most of the public, most elements of good governance are connected with money. Ika nga dun sa, when they were investigating Watergate, follow the money. In which case, as much as possible, information, data, and reports involving public funds should be automatically disclosed, both on a national level and on the level of government agencies. This also applies to many other forms of routine information, from appointments to executive issuances, wala dapat mga secret decrees and that sort of thing. And this includes ano ba magiging batayan pagdating sa pang-aabuso ng ng posisyon, mga salin dapat automatically disclosed din ito on all branches and all levels of government. And also, as much as possible, kung may mga updates or kung ano mga ginagawa ng mga iba't ibang ahensya, dapat i-disclose ito as much as possible automatically. And so that's why you have the section on the official gazette, etc. dun sa administration bill. And again, yung mga lehitimong karapatan ng pamahalaan para din sa seguridad ng bansa at sa interes ng nakakarami, presidential exceptions on defense, national security, diplomacy, lahat ng mga binanggit ni Senator Angara, mga legislative exceptions, privacy exceptions, judicial exceptions, dapat po itong galangin at ipasok under the view that kung you must be restrictive, the general view must be disclosure with exceptions, not everything secret with exceptions of what will be disclosed. There's an important difference there. The next was liabilities. Your rights as individuals and as citizens, also to prevent you problema po ito ng birokrasya at hindi po ng ibang tao. Kung biglang umulan ng papel, ano ba ang dapat gawin dito? So, for example, kung nandyan na ang impormasyon, you don't have to keep disclosing the same information. Pwede niyong ituro ang publiko sa website. So, we are confident, Madam Chair, that this bill, which we are submitting to you again, which already received favorable consideration in the Senate, in the last Senate, will again receive that favorable consideration at the soonest time from all of you. And we thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Secretary Quezon, for your presentation and also for at least naming things that concern you in particular, the executive branch. So our next presenter is the DOJ representative, Asek Asis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and other senators, members of this committee. Good morning po, and thank you for inviting us in this hearing. We have already prepared a position paper in complementary to the substitute bill or the administration bill that will be submitted by Yusek Manuel L. Quezon to the distinguished to this committee, Madam Chair. But let me just point out a portion of our position paper. The Department of Justice notes that while the 1987 Philippine Constitution sets out and recognizes in no uncertain terms in Section 7, Article 3 thereof, the right of the people to information on matters of public concern, the exercise of this constitutional right remains limited, and thus the passage of the FOI law in the Philippines becomes imperative. Toward that end, the proposed FOI bills will collectively provide a clear procedure on how to exercise the right and outlines the available remedies in case of denial of request for information. Truly give life to the people's right to information that is said to go hand in hand with the constitutional policies of full public disclosure and honesty in the public service. And it is meant to enhance the widening role of the citizenry in governmental decision-making as well as in checking abuse in government. Actually, I'm quoting a portion of the Supreme Court decision in Gincona versus Commission on Election. But having said that, we have some minor issues, and it is already fully discussed in this 10-page position paper of the department, Madam Chair. And I just have a few questions, if the chairman would allow. One of the issues we want to know is if this bill will still function in time of war or in case of emergency. If there is a provision that would suspend its effectivity in times of emergency or war, because while there is an exemption on the military aspect, there are some issues or there are some information that are not directly related to the military operations aspect, but somehow will affect the outcome of any emergency or situation or war, for that matter. And we also believe that, as previously expressed by the previous resource persons, that there is really a need to balance the right of the public as well as the right of the government. And we believe that there are some information that are best being kept in the hands of the governance and the government and should not be divulged in public, because it would work contrary to the interest of the public. Like, for instance, if you will divulge something that may cause panic in the public, if you see there are shortage of a specific basic goods in advance, before the government can act on it indefinitely, this might cause a panic buying before the government can attend to it, and you can just see the outcome of it. So these are some issues that we hope that this honorable committee will take into consideration in their deliberation. And again, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and the other members of this committee.
Thank you for raising that point, ASEC Asis. Certainly, we will answer that. Actually, if you look at the bills that were presented already, there is a period of declassification. For example, if the executive will deem something to be of national importance or a national security issue, he may classify the document as classified in the meantime, but there should be a reasonable time by which that information will be made available to the public. And the spirit of this bill that we are hopefully wanting to show is that national security and national welfare will be upheld at all times. So this is right, as USEC Manolo Quezon mentioned, the implementing rules will be very important so that we'll see how we are able to implement. But certainly, the head of the department will have a prerogative to withhold information in the meantime if they feel that there's a reasonable reason for this to be held. But they also have to say that within a certain period, this will be made available to the public. So let me go to the next resource speaker. We can go back to that point, sir, later on also. And I would also like to ask the opinion of our other resource speakers regarding that question that you have. Next, we have Rear Admiral Agdamag from the intelligence community, Nika.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, honorable senators. First of all, I'm representing the Secretariat of the National Security Council and the intelligence community, ma'am. We submitted our position paper, and may I read to you some important portions of our position paper. The Secretariat of the National Security Council is certainly committed to upholding the right of the people to information on matters of public concern and supports the policy of full disclosure of the government's transactions involving public interest subject to the procedures and limitations as may be provided by law. And these are in key jurisprudence. In the case of Legazpi versus Civil Service Commission, the Supreme Court recognized that certain types of information are exempt from public scrutiny, such as those affecting national security. And in the case of Chavez versus PCGG on 9 December 1998, the Supreme Court noted that the following are some of the recognized restrictions. A. National security matters and intelligence. 2. Trade secrets and banking transactions, criminal matters, and other confidential information as mentioned by Senator Sani Angara. All the foregoing had been at the core of the common position adopted by the National Security Council and the intelligence community. The National Intelligence Committee, or the NIC, chaired by the Director General, National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, and supervised by the National Security Advisor and Director General, NSC, the Honorable Secretary Cesar P. Garcia Jr., have synchronized their efforts and sought to concretize the circumstances that would serve as reasonable exceptions to the exercise by the people of their right to information. And these include, among others, the following: protection of documents, data, and information secured or procured in the course of intelligence operations, protection of confidential matters obtained through executive session of legislative bodies. So all of this, Madam Chair, we are one with what Yusek Manolo Quezon mentioned, that we are one with the administration substitute bill on the matter which the NSC and the intelligence community support. With that, Madam Chair, thank you very much and marami pong salamat.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. For the second half, for our sixth presenter, we would like to ask Ms. Juana Change for your position on this.
Magandang umaga po at salamat at nakasali ako dito sa panel na to. But I guess, while I'm part of the Right to Know right now, let me speak to you today as an artist. I want to be Janet Bariles Napoles this morning. Alam mo ninyo, hindi ho madali kung nasaan man ako ngayon. Mabuti naman po at tinayagan niyo akong lumabas. Pero alam mo ninyo, kinakabahan ako sa totoo lang kasi araw-araw, alam niyo, taas-taas ng BP ko. Sabi nila, 180 overacting. Hindi ho acting yon. Totoo pong talagang nahihirapan ako. Ngayon ho, pinapunta ako dito para sa FOI. Ang problema po nito, ay hindi ko alam kung anong kayang gawin ng FOI sa akin. Sa totoo lang po, alam ko naman na may mga marangal sa gobyerno, pero marami din hong mga walang hiya. Sa totoo lang po, kayo pong pangalanan. Yung mga kasama kong kumita, nasa kwarto pong ito. Pero wag na muna ngayon. Hindi ho ito ang tamang panahon para mabuking sila. Meron daw hong mga rallying gagawin, kayong mga civil society, itong mga katabi kong to. Meron sa 11, meron sa 13, meron pa sa 21, tapos daw po, bukod pa dun sa iba't iba ng mga gagawin nila. Ako daw po kasi ang best example tungkol dito sa FOI. Parang gano'n na nga ho. Kung ako na nga, ano ba ang mangyayari pag naipasa? Pag naipasa ho ba, ibig sabihin, kulong ako forever? O, ayaw. Kung naman ho ba hindi maipasa, pag lumaya ba ako, sigurado ba ako hindi ako mapapatay? Parang kung kahit anong gawin, parang kung talo ako. Pero ngayon ho, parang ang feeling ko lang, wala ho sa akin ng desisyon kung ipapasa yan o hindi ipapasa, pero parang exciting, di ba? Ang saya. Kasi ho ngayon, parang dahil merong ganito, merong oportunidad for big change. Kung merong oportunidad for big change, pwede hong, linisan na. Pero kaya ho ba? Ang tanong ho ay kaya. Kaya ba? Kasi ho, iba ho naman yung sasabihin yung ipapasa ninyo, pero pag ando na, lokohan ulit. Wow naman! Maawa naman ho kayo sa akin. Meron pa ho akong mga anak sa Amerika at wala naman hindi nagbabago. Lahat ho pwedeng magbago. So ang tanong lang ho, ano bang klaseng pagbabago ang gagawin natin kung matutuloy ho yung FOI? Salamat po.
Salamat po, Ms. Napoles, aka Wanna Change.
Meron na ako. Siguro gusto ko lang makorek. Wala po sa amin ang sangkot sa ngayon. Parang tayo na bago po kami.
Hindi pa po namin natitikman ang pork. Salamat po sa break na yan ng konti sa aming sa presentation. Ang susunod naman, our next resource speaker is a representative from the National Press Club, led by Vice President Marlon Purificacion.
Madam Chair, yung legal counsel na lang po namin.
Okay, the chair recognizes Attorney Mike Mela.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat, and we would like to thank you for inviting us in this significant proceeding. Foremost, the President of the National Press Club would like to convey his apology for not coming here. He is still suffering from dengue fever. So again, we thank you for inviting us. Like the others, we have already submitted. The National Press Club had already submitted their position paper in support of this measure. But without reiterating its content, please allow me to say something in relation to this topic. The National Press Club stands with its principle that press freedom and Freedom Information Act cannot be without the other. So the attempt to pass again this measure is definitely a welcome development for us. Because we believe this is long overdue. Recent history will tell us that there were several attempts to pass the Freedom Information Bill, but we have a lot of good and clever politicians who have a lot of things to hide, mysteriously, who halted the passage of the law. So we are just praying and hoping that these bills will not just remain bills. We hope that these bills will be transformed or ripened into law within the soonest, not the latest possible time. Definitely, these good politicians, with no disrespect intended, will do something within their power to delay, if not to forestall, the passage of this bill. So we just pray to the proponents of this measure that they will be vigilant enough or be courageous enough to face the battle that will surround the passage of this bill. We fully support, the National Press Club fully support this measure, except that we have some reservations to the exceptions introduced or proposed in these bills. And if I may be allowed to point out shortly. First, I particularly refer to the bill proposed by Senator Escudero. There is an exception pertaining to the privacy information. We have no objection to that. But the problem is that the way it was constructed, it is too general. If what is part of the exception is the address or the names of the wives or the names of the children of the particular public official, we have to specify it. Because by just stating in the measure the personal information, that is too general. There's also a provision in that bill pertaining to financial secrets. What is this financial secrets? I have no problem with the industrial secrets, trade secrets, but my problem is that what is this financial secrets? We have to delete that. That is very dangerous. And finally, again, without disrespect intended, I am, excuse me for my ignorance because I do not know what is being discussed during executive session, but it appears in the bill that one of the information excluded or one of the exceptions are those information discussed during the executive session. Again, I said I am ignorant what is being discussed there, but as far as my opinion is concerned, performance of public function must always be open to public. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Mela. Those apprehensions and the bill proposed by Senator Escudero is well taken, and we will answer that question also later. Thank you. Our next presenter is the representative from KBP, perhaps both the President Herman Basbanyo and Attorney Huralbal will make a presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Angara, Senator Ejercito. Allow me first to greet you, Madam Chair. A very happy birthday. You know that it was your birthday yesterday? Maligayang karawan po, Madam Chair. Well, a lot has been said about the FOI, and I don't want to consume additional time for this purpose, but let me just quote from some wise men talking from their experience, who said that a free society will only thrive if there is free expression and free exchange of ideas. If people can agree and disagree, a free society will only thrive if people have the ability to investigate and question, if people can converse and confront, and if there is freedom to publish and broadcast, Madam Chair, including especially on information coming from a public office that, of course, we know is a public trust. Issues in the likes of the pork barrel, Madam Chair, or the PIDAF, which we know came out because of the whistleblowers. FOW, or the freedom of whistleblowing, is okay, Madam Chair, but we need the FOI, or the Freedom of Information Law. To add more on the position of the KBP, I'd like to turn over the microphone to Attorney Hularban, our General Counsel.
Morning, Madam Chair. Morning, Senators. Thank you for this invitation, and that this FOI bill is being heard this early after the opening of Senate sessions is, we hope, a ray of hope that indeed the bill will finally be passed timely and not be again on the last minute stretch when the Senate and Congress have already adjourned. The KBP has been active in participating in this, the passage of this bill from the very start, and we continue to support it. In fact, if the KBP considers the Freedom of Information as a very important bill, and if the number of participants in this room is an indication of how important the public considers this bill, then it must be very high in the importance list, because this is probably one bill where we have this number of participants during a hearing. We have gone over the draft bills, Madam Chairperson and Senators, and it appears to have been, in fact, the product of the technical working groups in the past. We support the list of items which have been considered as not subject to mandatory disclosure or the confidentiality, subject to certain qualifications, which we will submit in our position paper. But in general, these are the list of exceptions already discussed thoroughly. There is one item, Madam Chair, that we noticed has not been incorporated, and however was taken up previously. This was pointed out by Yusek Quezon on the because of the concern of the Public Service Commission due to the criminal aspect and the penalties imposed. And one of the recommendations then made by the KBP was that if the requested information has already been lodged in the website of the agency concerned, then there should be no liability on the part of the public official for not providing the information because it's already accessible in the to the public. That, Madam Chair, we noticed is not incorporated, and we support that view. In fact, that recommendation came from the KBP. Other than that, Madam Chair, we will be submitting specific minor points for consideration on this bill. We thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Attorney Huralbal. Actually, I did read your position paper, and you're right. Information that is immediately uploaded in the website of the department or the agency will at least make it easier also for the employees of that agency to comply. Because if it's, but then again, it's a matter of the capability now of all of our agencies, and the National Computer Agency, I think, is tasked to coordinate, to update all of these capabilities so that we will be able to comply with the information. But thank you for the recommendation of the KBP. Our next resource person is Professor Arao from the University of the Philippines. Sir?
Magandang umaga po. The University of the Philippines College of Mass Communication has already issued a statement last January 28 on the need for an authentic Freedom of Information Act. Now, upon close scrutiny of the 8 pending bills related to the FOI, there is a need to repeat UPCMC's 3 recommendations. Number 1, in the context of transparency, there should be a clear sunshine clause in the proposed FOI law to declassify information found to have historical value after 15 years. 15 years is suggested as this is the prescriptive period for the filing of cases against graft and corruption under Republic Act number 3109. Number 2, in the context of accountability, there should be no provision implying that the FOI will be prospective in nature. Fortunately, not any of the bills reflect that prospective nature, because any attempt to prevent the FOI from being retroactive would make classified but important information under previous administrations practically inaccessible. And this is what happened in our experience in the previous Congresses. Number 3, there should be an explicit provision allowing the expeditious granting of information to journalists and researchers. In the Senate and House of Representatives versions of the proposed FOI law, the maximum waiting period of 15 working days could compromise a media practitioner's data gathering. Now, according to our college, these recommendations would help promote knowledge exchange, improve media practice, and ensure the smooth flow of information to the people to whom access to government-held information is vital so they can hold their officials to account and for the sake of democratic participation in governance and the making of state policy. While SBN 64, as well as other pending Senate bills submitted to this committee, state that an executive order establishing guidelines for the information to be kept secret shall, quote-unquote, specify the reasonable period after which the information shall be automatically declassified or subject to mandatory declassification review under Section 7A. An authentic FOI should have something more explicit in terms of time frame in particular and wording in general. In the House of Representatives, it is interesting to note that there is a bill, House Bill number 347, that was filed, and it provides for a clear sunshine clause under Section 5K, or mandatory compliance. May I just quote from it? All classified information contained in all government agency records that are more than 25 years old and have been determined to have historical value shall be automatically declassified whether or not the records have been reviewed. Subsequently, all classified information in such records shall be automatically declassified no longer than 25 years from the date of its original classification. It is hoped that the Senate Committee on Public Information and Mass Media could also include this provision in the consolidated version, keeping in mind the UPCMC's recommendation that the period of declassification be pegged at 15 years instead of 25 years. Now, as regards the expeditious granting of information to journalists and researchers, it is highly recommended that Section 8, or requests for access to information of HBN 347, be incorporated into the Senate's consolidated version of the FOI. And may I just quote that very brief provision of Section 8. All government agencies shall expeditiously grant information requests from journalists. In the context of journalism, there is clearly a need to analyze the implications of a government's compliance as regards information requests within a specified number of days, ranging from 7 days to 15 days. Since deadlines are an everyday reality for print, broadcast, and online journalists, government compliance with or denial of information requests within a 7 to 15-day time frame is both unrealistic and unacceptable. Even if journalists can be passionately persistent and remarkably creative in information gathering, government agencies should ensure expeditious granting of their requests. In order to discourage a journalist from circumventing the law in his or her quest to get the elusive information, the government should be transparent in providing necessary information and efficient in acting on such requests. In pushing for this provision, it must be stressed that special treatment is not being requested for journalists. We're not Janet Napoles after all. Expeditious granting or denial of requests from journalists should be seen in the context of government's commitment to provide an atmosphere conducive to the exercise of press freedom. The government's cooperation with media organizations would surely help fulfill the latter's sworn duty to provide relevant and up-to-date information to the people. Going back to the issue of declassification of certain confidential documents after a certain number of years, it is interesting to note that then U.S. President Bill Clinton signed Executive Order 12958 in April 1995, which authorized the release of previously classified national security documents more than 25 years old and deemed to have permanent historical value. As a result of the inclusion of certain previously classified national security documents under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act, the people were better informed of what the U.S. government has done through the years. The Baltimore Sun, for example, requested and got hold of 2 previously classified CIA manuals. The latter gave details on torture methods used against suspected subversives in Latin America in the 1980s, effectively refuting past denials of the CIA. By requesting the classified information, details like this were published in January 1997 in the Baltimore Sun. Torture methods taught in the 1983 manual include stripping suspects naked and keeping them blindfolded. Interrogation room should be windowless, dark, and soundproof with no toilet. So that's in the CIA manual for torture, which was put out into the open. Now, if the Sunshine Clause is included in the proposed FOI in the Philippines, the media and the public can greatly benefit from the full disclosure of certain confidential documents that have historical and social value, particularly those that are related to burning issues of the day, all of which clearly have historical contexts. The classified national security documents could provide more details, for example, of what life was during martial law from 1972 to 1986. And perhaps we can get to the truth of what happened on August 21, 1983, when a certain senator was assassinated at the airport. We could know that through a Sunshine Clause. Now, through these revisions to the proposed FOI, the government may uphold freedom of the press and Constitution, which is full public disclosure of all transactions involving public interest. That's all, Madam Senator. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that presentation. Mr. Ramon Del Rosario will leave for a prior commitment, but before we excuse Mr. Del Rosario, you might, the senators here present might have some quick questions for him.
Madam Chair, before Mr. Rosario leaves, I'd just like to ask, just in case the FOI is passed by this Congress, would it be able to restore the tarnished image of the institutions of the recent scandals? Do you think it would?
The FOI bill would be only one of the elements that would help restore, I think, the image of the institutions. I think how the guilty parties are dealt with is also an important component of that. And what happens afterwards in terms of how these institutions are managed and operated, I think will also have a lot to do with that. But certainly freedom of information will assist in restoring the people's faith that at least the information is available to them, Mr. Senator.
Thank you. So at least this will be an integral part in restoring that trust and confidence in our, not only in the leadership, but in the institutions that were damaged recently. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator JV. Senator Angara, do you have any questions for? Thank
Madam
you for.
Mr. Only. No questions.
Thank you, Mr. Del Rosario, for sharing your time here today. Your points are well taken, and we will incorporate that in drafting our committee report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much again, Madam Chair, for giving us the opportunity.
Okay, the chair would now like to recognize Attorney Nepo Malaluan for the right to know coalition.
Salamat, Madam Chair. Magandang umaga rin sa mga senador na narito ngayong umaga. We have submitted, Madam Chair, our position paper. I will not discuss all of them, and I would like to zero in on a brief summary of the bills as we see them presented or filed with the committee. At the same time, if I might have a few minutes left later on, I'd like to also just mention some of the groups, members of the Right to Know Right Now coalition that are in the gallery. Madam Chair, papasalamat kami na sa maagang pagdinig nitong panukalang batas na ito. Napakatagal na itong pinananawagan at ina-advocate both outside and in the halls of Congress. Ngayon nga ay narito na sa Senado si Senator Angara at saka si Senator Ejercito, who have been dutifully attending the committee hearings at the House also. We would like to say, Madam Chair, na hindi nag-uumpisa sa scratch itong committee ito with the bills that are filed. The bills that are before the committee, Your Honor, already embody the long legislative history of this bill. Apat po sa panukalang batas na nakafile ay sumasalamin doon sa Bicameral Conference Committee report na muntik nang naipasa ng 14th Congress. Ito po ay ang Senate Bill sa 15, 36, 90, and 514. Ni Senators Escudero, Trillanes, Cayetano, and Doren Legarda. Ang bill naman po ni Senator Ejercito ay sumasalamin doon sa Malacanang bill na i-endorse ni Secretary Butchabad to the Committee on Public Information in the House at last February of 2012. At yun naman pong panukala ni Senator Sani Angara ay sumasalamin doon sa committee report ng House na naipasa, na i-endorse sa plenaryo nitong 15th Congress. At ang panukala ni Senator Gregorio Honasan ay yun po ang naipasa ng Senado ng 15th Congress on third reading. Yun yung POGI bill. At ang panukala naman po ni Senator Chofisto Gengona is mainly the bill passed on third reading with a few more modifications. The only bill that we see as distinct is the bill that was filed by Senator Osmeña, which is Senate Bill 44. And those of many of us, I see some here who have participated in the legislative process in the 14th Congress, would attest to the detailed line-by-line review conducted by then Committee Chairman Senator Cayetano with government and non-government stakeholders, as well as a similar review in the House, and went through interpellation on constitutional issues by Senators Joe Cararroyo and Miriam Defensor Santiago. And this was what eventually resulted into bicameral conference committee report. Ang nangyari po pagkatapos nung version ng bicameral conference committee report, nagkaroon pa rin ng pagbabago in the 15th Congress, and those changes were principally the key amendments proposed by Malacanang to address concerns by the executive bureaucracy as well as the concerns raised by President Aquino at the start of his term. And plus additional inputs from Senator Honasan, particularly his introduction of the concept of people's ownership of government information. Gusto ko lang pong bigyan ng maiksing summary yung changes from the bicameral conference committee version to what was approved on third reading by the Senate, and the similar version as embodied by the committee report of the House. Una po, it adopted the inclusion of the phrase national security in exception 1, thereby providing the executive greater flexibility
than the bicameral conference version, which confined national security matters to defense and foreign affairs. This addresses the concerns expressed by President Aquino over the adequacy of the protection of national security matters. It adopted also, Madam Chair, a new exception on the presidential communications privilege, or more popularly referred to as the executive privilege, to address President Aquino's concern over his access to free and frank opinion and discussion with his closest advisors. To balance naman ho yung pag-expand ng exceptions with the advocates' concern over potential abuse of exceptions and criticisms of watering down of the bill, the safeguards were further strengthened, and in addition to the legal presumption in favor of access, may nilista pong additional safeguards. Kasama po dito yung ang exceptions ay kailangan ay strictly construed. Ang exceptions cannot be invoked to cover up a crime, wrongdoing, or graft or corruption. At kung maaring i-segregate yung exempt at hindi, ay pwedeng i-disclose pa rin yung non-exempt portion. The President, Supreme Court, Senate, House may waive an exception with respect to information when they deem that there is a compelling or overriding public interest in disclosure. And finally, in the exercise of the judicial power to interpret the Constitution, the exceptions may be overcome if the requester is able to prove before a court of competent jurisdiction that there is compelling public interest or need that outweighs the interest in keeping the information secret or confidential. In relation po dun sa administrative burden, at nabanggit din po kasi ng mga nasa gobyerno na lalong-lalo na po yung automatic disclosure of certain information. Yung dati pong version na in-approve ng Bicameral Conference Committee requires the automatic disclosure of certain transactions in full, yung mga kontrata, at sabi po nila baka napakabigat nun. Naging pagbabago po ay register na lamang, a register of major description of those transactions, at transactions only involving more than 50 million ang nire-require to be published in full. Of course, that is complemented by a request-based access. Malacanang, in fact, expanded the list of documents for mandatory disclosure by including the documents required by DBM and DILG for website posting. At yung Malacanang din po ang nagdagdag noong automatic publication of statements of assets and liabilities and net worth. In relation to concerns over gravity of the offenses, the punishable offenses that used to be criminal under the Bicameral Conference report were recategorized into administrative liabilities only, at only leaving a few as criminal acts. And in addition, the defense of good faith was introduced. Sa makatuwid po sa tingin namin ay talagang mahaba na ang binasa nga kanina ni Senator Sani Angara, yung mga exceptions, at ang pinagsimulan ho niyan ay mula sa wala hanggang sa mahaba, at ang sa paningin po namin talaga ay this has been discussed fully. Sayang at nauulit yung ibang mga issues na many of the provisions in the exceptions came from the Department of National Defense, for example, and the security group. Ang sa tingin po namin ay lalong-lalo na sa pagkakataong ito at sa katagalan na ang malaking bahagi po talaga ng pagpasa nitong panukalang batas na ito ay yung political will po na finally this bill be passed.
At yan nga po ang sinasagawa ngayon ng Senado na pagdinig sa panukalang Freedom of Information. Ilang resource speakers ang nagbigay ng kanilang opinyon at posisyon kaugnay nga sa FOI. At kabilang po dito si Ginoong Ramon del Rosario, ang chairman ng Makati Business Club. Nagsabing sinusuportahan ng buong-buo ng mga negosyante ang pagpasa sa FOI Bill. Malaking tulong daw ito at itong pagpasa sa batas sa FOI para masugpo ang korupsyon na pangunahing sanhi ng problema sa pagpapatakbo ng negosyo sa bansa. at mahalaga rin daw ang FOI para maitaguyod ang transparency at masustain ang kasalukuyang momentum ng ating ekonomiya at negosyo. Nagpahayag din ng posisyon sina Undersecretary Manolo Quezon ng Presidential Communications Group, Asek Zabidin Asis ng DOJ at Vicente Agdamag ng National Security Council. Suportado po nila lahat ang FOI para sa matuwid na pamamahala. Pero umiiral na raw ang transparency. At sinabi rin nila na dapat daw may mga exception tulad ng mga bagay na may kinalaman sa national security, national welfare, pati na rin po ang diplomacy, legislative at judicial exceptions. Kaya nararapat lamang na magkaroon umano ng malinaw na implementing rules and regulations. Bagamat tanggap po ito ng National Press Club, di raw dapat lahat ng exceptions ay payagan.